Well, one more hour, one more webinar in this 24-hour webinar marathon from Legacy Family Tree Webinars. Good morning, US, Ride and Shine. Good afternoon, Europe, and good evening, Australia and New Zealand. This is Daniel Horowitz broadcasting live from Israel, and with great pleasure to welcome our next speaker, Zbigniew Stedner, who will be telling us how to use MyHeritage to research Polish family history and to find living relatives in Poland. Hello, Zbigniew. How are you doing?
Hello. Thank you very much. I'm fine, a bit stressed, but hope.
Okay, so just to release a little bit your stress, please give me one more second to properly introduce you, because you have been researching Poland and Central Europe for over 10 years, Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, and Slovakia. You spoke at international conferences and prepared webinars on various topics connected to research in Central Europe, and your full bio is available at the Legacy Family Tree webinars for those of you interested. Personally, I will keep in touch with you for the Ukraine research of my personal family. But right now, let me allow you to show your screen and go ahead with your presentation, which I'm sure it's going to be very interesting.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you all people that gathered here for taking part in this webinar. I hope you'll find it useful. During this workshop, I will describe the ways to use various resources available through MyHeritage that can be used to find information about ancestors originating from Poland, and to find and to help find relatives that still may live there. I will first try to make the shortest possible introduction to the research in Poland and the history of Poland, as it is needed to understand why we should not limit ourselves to a few resources available in our heritage catalog in the Polish section. Then I will describe the entries from this catalog and will discuss their use and their advantages and disadvantages. I will then move to other interesting positions from the catalog that you can find in other newbie countries. And in the next part, I will move to the US catalog entries, and that may be the most important or useful for the researchers interested in immigrants that emigrated from Poland or the area that used to be Poland, and I will show how to use some of them. Finally, I will move to the resource that is unique for MyHeritage, that is family trees uploaded by individual users from Poland. In most cases, they have been started a few years ago, at the beginning of a big wave of popularity of family history research in Poland. The concern about privacy was not that strong yet, so thousands of people uploaded their information and made it available for MyHeritage, making it a unique source that is not available anywhere else. I will talk about the strategies for using this kind of information, its advantages and possible traps. Okay. the shortest possible introduction to the research in Poland and the history of Poland. First of all, it's important to realize that the history of Poland was quite dynamic. We fought with all our neighbors throughout history, and as a result, Polish borders changed many times. They also changed quite a lot in the last 2-3 centuries. The red area, for example, shows the current territory of Poland. The red line border shows the original shape of the country about 1,000 years ago. The blue line marks the borders of Poland between the wars. The gray line shows the maximum range of Poland, or the Polish-Lithuanian kingdom at the time, around 17th century. In addition to this, from the end of the 18th century until 1918, Poland did not exist at all, and its area was divided between Russia, Prussia, and Austria. There are a few consequences of this dynamic history for our research. First of all, the country was always, until 1945, multi-ethnic and multi-religious. So the documents from the Polish archives may also, excuse me, may also be interesting for researchers whose ancestors were German, Jewish, Ukrainian, Lithuanian, Belarusian, Armenian, etc., and could be Roman Catholic, Greek Catholic, Orthodox, Lutheran, Jewish, and others. Second, the interesting documents can be found in other countries as well, especially in Germany, Ukraine, Lithuania, Belarus, but also Russia, Slovakia, Czechia. So we will look also at what MyHeritage offers for these countries. Here are a few interesting facts making the research in Poland more fun. There was almost no civil registration before 1945, except for a short period at the beginning of the 19th century in part of the Russian partition and German partition from 1874, which means that was mostly only religious registration. So we need to use other kinds of records as well, especially census-like records, although there was no real census similar to the one you may know from the US, for example. In addition, there were different systems of civil registration used depending on part of Poland and time frame, and several different languages were used for this. And taking it all together, it makes the research in Poland rather complicated. Okay, let's move. Let's see what resources MyHeritage has for researchers interested in Poland. So in the geographical catalog under Poland section, to see what collections they have, we need to move the mouse over the research in the top right corner of main page of MyHeritage. Then choose collection catalog, and then scroll down a bit, and in the left panel find Refine by Location section and click Europe. Then we click Refine Further, and in the list we find Poland and click it. We have 14 different collections to choose from. I will briefly discuss some of them now. The first database contains information about over 4 million graves in Poland. Some entries may contain birth and death dates, pictures of the graves, and information about other people buried in the same grave. This database is based on the largest Polish database of this kind, Grobonet, but in my opinion, MyHeritage search engine is much more user-friendly, and it is in English. Here's any language that you use. Here's an example of what you can see when you enter the surname you're looking for. So the page with results first, then an individual page on the right with birth date, death date, burial place, and then pictures of the grave. One pictures from distance and one closer pictures with the data. 9 of 14 databases in the Polish section of the catalog concerns Jewish genealogy, and at least some of them originated from Jewish.org. The largest, with over 4 million entries, is the Lithuanian Jewish database, which is a compilation of information from revision lists, so a kind of census in the most that was used in the most eastern part of the Russian partition, the provinces that were incorporated into Russia, vital records, tax records, etc. From the end of 18th century until the 1940s. This database contains information from different kinds of records, so the content may differ depending on the kind of the record, but they often contain data for family members of the person we are looking for as well. So here we have a record of marriage from 1896 from Sejny County in Suwałki Gubernia, in Suwałki province. It is currently in northeast Poland, and it contains names, dates of birth, places, and parents' names. Another very interesting Jewish database is Łódź Getto list, which contains over 200,000 entries. Łódź Getto was one of the largest in the territory of occupied Poland, and one of the one that lasted the longest until 1944. The information you can find in this database are names, addresses, so current at the time of when the list was made, and previous addresses, profession, etc. So it provides quite a lot of detailed information about people that happened to live there at that time. Other Jewish connections are the index of Jewish displaced person refugee cards from after the Second World War, containing data for survivors emigrating to the US, and it includes also some Jews from Poland, and the documents from a few concentration camps from Flossenburg, Dachau, and also Auschwitz death certificates for years 1941, 1943. But in this case, please take into account that it is very far from complete, and as the majority of people who died in Auschwitz camp have never been recorded anywhere and were killed just after leaving the train. Also, this database contains death certificates of people of any religion and nationality that died in the time frame in Auschwitz. So you may find Polish Roman Catholic there as well. So here, for example, you can see the record of Wacław Kowalski, Polish Roman Catholic, born in 1914 in Dęblin, Poland, and died on October 22, 1942 in Auschwitz-Birkenau. There are 3 smaller databases of Jewish birth, marriage, and death records from Piotrków Trybunalski town, submitted by a user. Each containing a few thousand entries. The largest non-Jewish database contains vital records from Tarnów Roman Catholic Diocese church books. This is a very interesting and potentially useful database, but should be used with great. We should be very careful while using it for the reasons I will describe in a minute. It contains almost 3 million entries from church books from different parishes in the Tarnów diocese. According to the description, the records may come from the years 1612 to 1900, but in fact, the oldest are from the last decades of the 18th century, and the newest are from the first decades of the 20th century. Tarnów diocese at the time was much larger than it is now, and the database may contain records from some parishes that are now in Przemyśl and Rzeszów dioceses. So a big part of current South and Southeast Poland, and former Western Galicia. This database was originally created by the LDS Church, which took pictures in the town of church archive, and the microfilms were available in LDS libraries. At some point, however, there was some disagreement or misunderstanding between the LDS and the Tarnów diocese, and after this, then the microfilms were not available, at least here in Europe. But the LDS volunteers created indexes for of some of these parishes. However, the indexes were not the best. The main reason, I think, is that the volunteers were not native Polish language speakers, and very often had some problems with reading Polish first names and surnames. The original records were in Latin, and in most cases in relatively simple tabular form, but still you should have some understanding of the language and the grammar to be able to spell the names correctly. The most obvious example is our surnames, especially in Old Polish. We use in Old Polish they used different forms depending on the gender and civil status of the person. Plus, we have a few so-called cases in the language, and even if the whole record was written in Latin, very often the names declined, right? Changed as if they were written in Polish. Anyway, result is that the names are very often quite often changed to quite big degree, right? And sometimes are quite far from the original version. It is easy with relatively simple names like Kowalski, for example, but maybe more difficult with some more complicated names like, for example, Oprządek, which can be Oprzędek, Oprządek, Oprzadkówna, Oprządkówna, Uprzatek, etc. Anyway, we should be very careful with this database and we should try different versions of the surname we are interested in before we give up. I also have the impression that the poorest indexes were removed were withdrawn from this database. So the database that is in MyHeritage right now, it seems better than the original indexes created by LDS, but still we have to be careful using it. One more thing we need to notice here is that indexes used in most cases Latin versions of first names. So in some cases they may differ quite a lot from the names your ancestor used in fact. For example, Ladislaus could be Władysław, or sometimes could be Walter when they emigrated to the US. Adalbertus was most probably known as Wojciech, but sometimes could use Albert as the name. On some occasions, the indexers tried to use Polish versions of the names, however. In this database, we can find birth, marriage, and death records, mostly from the 19th century. They contain different information depending on the kind of record and the time frame. Generally the newer the record, the more info they contained. But usually there were names, dates, and of the event, parents' names, town, parish, and very interesting, the house number. This number can be used to find the exact place where the house was located if the so-called cadastral records are available for a given village. As I said, original records for this database are available in Tarnów Diocese Archive. Another large database is Roman Catholic Church records from Lublin province for the years 1784-1964. Again, the title does not fully correspond to the exact time frame, as the records are mostly from the first half of the 20th century, and births end in 1912, marriages in 1937, and deaths in even in 1981. The database contains currently over 110,000 records. The quality of indexes is much better, and they were for sure created by Polish language speakers, and they use Polish versions of first names, surnames, and names of places, even though the language of the 19th century records was Russian, and it switched to Polish only around 1918. Here you can see an entry for a 1912 marriage record. It contains names of newlyweds, parents' names, date of marriage, estimated birth years and place. At the bottom, there is a link to the actual recorded family search. The last database in the catalog is a digitized and indexed version of the 1857 index of nobility from Galicia. So Southeast Poland, and so currently Southeast Poland and Western Ukraine, or part of Western Ukraine. You should take into account that unlike in other European countries, the nobility in Poland was quite a large social group, and it's estimated it contained even 10% of the society. So some of them were very poor and did not differ much from the rest of the society, except for personal freedom mainly. This book, however, like other publications of this kind concerning other parts of Poland, is very far from being complete, as at the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, countries that occupied Poland required Polish noble families to confirm their rights. To do this, they would need to, in most cases, provide some documents and prove they own some land. Of course, the poorest group could not fulfill any of these requirements, so were not considered noble anymore, and the richest just didn't care. So this kind of book in the database lists mostly kind of noble middle class. Anyway, the information you can find here is the surname of the family, the name of their coat of arms, and where and when they confirm their nobility, which may help us look for further roots of this family. Here are some other collections that contain information from the areas that used to be a part of Poland. So, for example, for Ukrainian, the most interesting are the Jewish birth records that contain over 200,000 records. They contain also entries from the areas. They contain, of course, entries from the areas that were never in Poland or were in Poland quite long ago, but they also contain records from areas that were in Poland quite recently, like Kamieniec Podolsk, for example. Another interesting collection containing over 112 records is Ukraine revision lists, so kind of census-like records from parts of Ukraine that were occupied by Russia in the 19th century. And some of them, so they cover also the Volhynia region, which between the wars belonged to Poland as well. Another database is Ukraine births and baptisms for years 1764, 1879, 42,000 records. Only a few places, but includes some entries from Lvov as well. So the current Western Ukraine that used to belong to Poland. For Belarus, we have, for example, Belarus revision list, so the same kind of census. It contains mostly Jewish entries. There are mostly Jewish entries in this database. Again, very large database of Jewish births, marriages, and deaths. 3 different databases containing over 500,000 records together. And two remaining are Belarus Duma voters list from the first decade of the 20th century from Minsk region. Duma was Russian parliament. The database contains some Jewish and some Polish entries. And the last database is Grodno Gubernia, so province voters list for 1912. And it contains also Białystok area, that is the current north, that's in current North Poland. The list includes both Jewish and not Jewish. For Germany, we have the following collections: Germany births and baptisms with over 100 million records from West Prussia, which partially is in current Poland and where both ethnic Polish and German lived for ages. The next database is marriages from the same Maria, over 28 million records, and the database called Germany Deaths and Burials with 7 million records. And there's another database of duplicates from Prussia, Brandenburg, and Posen region. Posen region, that's current Greater Poland or Poznań area in Western Poland. And this database contains images and indexes of births, marriages, and deaths from state copies of some parish registers from the provinces of that I described. Most of it is in current Western Poland. And the last is West Prussia church books with almost 4 million records, a compilation of sources from the period between the 18th century and the 1945 from Catholic and Protestant parish registers, and information from individual researchers from Germany and abroad. And the geographic area is West Prussia, so current Western Poland. Other interesting collections that especially descendants of immigrants may be interested are U.S. Especially immigrants for three of 4 of those databases, immigrants from descendants of immigrants from Poland in the U.S. might be interested. That's U.S. census records contained in different time frames. United States, World War I draft registration, Austria-Hungary, World War I casualty lists, and U.S. World War II Army enlistment. So MyHeritage has census records, both indexes and actual pictures for many federal and state censuses. In the case of Polish immigrants, we should be most interested in the latest federal censuses since, let's say, 1890 until 1950. Depending on the census, they provide different amounts of information. Here you can see my great-grandfather's brother Kacper Herma record from 1912. From this record, we can learn he was born in 1883, I think, in Poland. Both parents were born in Poland. He immigrated in 1908. And this information may help us find the actual immigration record and trace the person back to the old country and find the place where they were born, for example. We receive also his spouse and children's names. There are also links to other probable records for this person. Draft records that are also available through MyHeritage can also help us to trace Polish immigrant ancestors. They may contain information about birth date and birthplace. Sometimes this is the only record where we can find the actual name of the town of birth. Here, please notice that the person was born in Polecznica, Russia, and its nationality is Russian, but in this case, Russia is here because Poland did not exist at that time. In other cases, we may find Austria-Hungary, Austria, or Prussia. This database may give us information about relatives who served in the Austrian-Hungarian army during World War I and were either killed or wounded. It is based on Austrian army lists that were printed during the war. And it gives us name, birthplace, birth year, and the unit they served in. Okay, we now move to the most interesting kind of records that we can find at MyHeritage, that is family trees. This data was contributed by MyHeritage users a few years ago. As I said at the beginning of a wave of interest of family history in Poland. At the time, there was a very popular service called Przodek.pl, I think. It offered its users the possibility of sharing their research results and building their family trees and organizing the information, records, and pictures they had. There were two main advantages that caused that it quickly became a leader in the Polish market. First of all, the interface was available in Polish, easy to use, relatively modern, and provided a lot of useful functions. The second most important, using the whole service was free. It quickly became the first and the only place for Polish interested in their family history and people with very different levels of proficiency in research and the amount of information they're able to gather, added their data. Another factor that helped to grow the whole database at the time was that the privacy law was not that strict yet. Actually, it was probably as strict as it is now. By the way, much more strict than in the US. But there was no such awareness about it. As a result, a huge database containing mostly data concerning the last few generations, including living people, were created. The data concerned the last 2 or 3 generations, as that is what probably 90% of users knew or were able to ask their older living relatives. And in most cases, they never went to an archive. One advantage of this situation is that the information concerning the last generations in the database is more or less reliable, so can be useful to look for living relatives. So the names are probably usually right, but the exact dates are not necessary. Then the service changed names and owners a few times, I think, At some point, the owners of the database decided to charge for using it. The result was that the majority of users stopped using the service. Some of them removed their data, but the majority left it, but stopped updating. I think it is safe to say that the majority of the trees are not up to date, and the newer family discoveries or corrections have not been entered. Another feature of the service is I need to tell here about that has a serious influence on the quality of the data as well is the possibility of copying whole branches of genealogical tree. The big advantage from the point of view of an average user is the possibility of developing quickly their family tree without actually doing the research. It, however, is rather risky as we never know the quality of the data. And if they contain errors, they are, of course, the errors are, of course, repeated in a new tree as well. That risk, to some degree, is also present when we exchange genealogical information offline, of course, with our cousins, however, on a smaller scale. Here we can not know who copies our information or who is the person we copied the info from. We do not control also what happens to the information that has been copied once, how it changes, how it is being copied further, etc. Here's the case of the family history information I entered several years ago. In the beginning, it was copied by my distant cousin with whom we worked together, but later we lost contact. At some point, it turned out that there was an error at one branch concerning one of our common ancestors, probably because I have 3 different great-grandmothers with the same first name and surname. So we initially had one of them wrong. I corrected this information, but was not able to contact my cousin, and his version of the tree contained the wrong one. I continued to do the research and added some information from time to time. So our trees started to be more and more, to differ more and more. In the meantime, big parts of both trees have been copied by other users. Some of them I knew at the beginning, then by some people that I obviously am not related to. They may have in their tree someone that married someone some of my relatives. Anyway, they copied trees of different level, at the different level of development and propagated, of course, in most cases, the biggest error we made at the beginning. I can recognize the origin of these new trees as many of the copies contain also pictures I originally uploaded, and I have the paper version. I tried to contact some of them at the beginning and either inform them about the possible errors or propose some kind of cooperation, but rarely heard back. So at some point I stopped to update the data and just kept it as it was. The low answer rate of tree owners is a big problem for users wishing to get in touch or correct information or get more details. Since most of the tree owners stopped using the service a few years ago, it is very rare case that we get the answer from someone at all. So usually we are left with what they provided originally, and we need to verify the information ourselves. Here's one of the entries for my grandmother, Teresa Herma, nie Procner, from my distant relatives tree, who copied this from my cousin, most probably from the one that I incorporated at the beginning. Her record has been copied since then many times and incorporated into different trees. Some of the duplicates still have the pictures I originally uploaded. Here's what the result page looks like, and then her profile with geographical data and information about relatives. And here's a tree view. Okay, I think I'm quite close to running out of time, so maybe I'll just try to draw some conclusions. To conclude, the family trees may give us a lot of valuable information that is not easily available anywhere else, as they in many cases concern recent generations. So very often publishing them now is not possible under strict Polish privacy law. But we should use them very careful as they may contain errors and may not be very up to date. Anyway, they may be very helpful, especially if you plan to visit and if you are interested in finding links to relatives that are still living in Poland, because there's a big chance that people in those trees are still alive, or maybe the next generation. Okay, I think that's all I had prepared for today. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Zbigniew. Definitely interesting, especially for me, to see the MyHeritage databases from another point of view, and going in deep on the Polish records, which is not exactly my forte, but I'm very happy to see that it is being very used for other people. Now, before we go to answer questions, I need to tell everybody that this presentation is being recorded and it will be at the Family Tree webinar website probably in a couple of weeks, because with this 24-hour genealogy webinar marathon, we are generating 25 webinars that needs to go up on the website. Once they do, you will have access to them for 7 days for free. After that, a membership will be required, and that will give you unlimited access to all the classes that we will have right there, and including the handouts, which, by the way, including the handout for this presentation, it is available and will be available at the website. If you need a subscription, you can get one for a very reasonable price, and sometimes maybe even with a discount. But today we are giving away one of those free memberships to the Legacy Family Tree webinar, and you could win it. If I click the random generator right here, and I select a name which is going to be Sana Miller. So congratulations, Sana. Jeff is going to be in touch with you over email to give you all the details how you can get and enjoy that yearly subscription. Everybody else, if you don't have a subscription yet, feel free to go into the website and just subscribe yourself. So again, let me go over the questions that I have here. One of the questions, and I didn't hear it at least from your presentation, was databases from Silesia under the Austrian control. Do you know any available databases about that area?
Well, Silesia under the small part of Silesia that was under Austrian control, that was just 2 towns. So actually, I don't think there's anything. Well, I can check this, but that's actually my hometown. Right?
Okay.
So Bielsko, Cieszyn, that's the part of Poland that you can still consider Silesia, and was under Austrian control. most of Silesia was under German, under Prussia control. So those databases are listed under Germany, and
Okay, so there.
and then I mentioned, then I will check if there's anything, but I don't think so.
Okay, so there is a lead over there, knowing that they are under German records. Now, Miriam asked about Jewish birth and death documented in church records. And I'm going to jump again and say, I think they are, because church usually recorded all the birth and the death in the town. But you are the expert. Are we right or wrong?
Well, yes and no. So, so in the short period in the beginning of 19th century, in years 1808 to 1826, in the so-called Kingdom of Poland, so part of Russian partition, there was civil registration, and in most cases, civil registry officers were Roman Catholic priests. Not always, but in most cases, and they wrote two kinds of books. So separately, they wrote civil registry books, regardless of the religion, and there was no information about the religious ceremony, and parallelly, at the same time they had separate books for just Roman Catholics that contained baptisms, etc. But those civil books, they were for Roman Catholic, Jewish, Lutheran, and so only years 1808, 1825 or 1806. But those are not religious books. They are civil books, but in fact written by Roman Catholic priests mostly. But in the archives, they are under civil records usually. Although some of the archives may keep them until the parish under the parish records.
Okay, so now we know a more exact answer. Thank you. Carla is asking, what are the voting records called in Poland between 1920 and 1940?
Okay, they could be called spis wyborców, for example.
Okay.
I can probably, I don't know if I can type it in chat.
Yeah, you can do that in a few minutes without any problem, and I'm gonna leave it over there. Unless, like Carla, you can just try to Google voting record. I'm sorry, not Google. Well, Google Translate voting records. Will that work?
Yes, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there could be two different words in Polish: wyborców or głosujących.
Okay. Okay, so you can write it in the chat with no problem, and everybody will see those words.
I already wrote it, so I don't know if you can see this.
I don't. Okay, yeah, it's only for panelists, but
Okay.
I can actually write it for the whole audience, so you will have it over there, and I'm just reproducing whatever Zbigniew is writing over there. Okay, so of course, a lot of people very thankful to you for pointing them in the right direction. We have time for one more question. Let's say this is Joanne is asking, is there a database for Operation Vistula, those who were relocated from Galicia?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know such database exists?
Well, no, not in MyHeritage. There are. I don't know of any database that is just for this group.
Okay.
there are, of course, records in the state archives in Sanok or in Przemyśl or in Rzeszów that that potential database could be based on, but I don't know if anyone already created such database, unless some Ukrainian organizations or researchers, but I haven't seen any.
Okay. Anyhow, Zbigniew, thank you very, very much for sharing your time and your knowledge with all of us. This webinar was focused on MyHeritage, and I will be the first one as a genealogist to recognize that there are other databases out there that if you are researching your Polish family, you should look into them as well. In the meantime, thank you all for being here with us, and I will invite you for our next webinar, Unearthing the Treasures in the Irish Registry of Deeds by Natalie Buddle. This is the webinar that will start in just 10 more minutes. So thank you, everybody, and see you right now over there. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.